Oh, here we are. We're on.
Wisdom.
Welcome to episode 65 of the Jungle Brothers podcast. How you guys doing? It's me, Joe Worthington, Paul Fotofili, your hosts,
Hello.
and longtime JB coach, legend, and old friend of ours, Aaron Lang. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you guys?
Yeah, super good, bro. Really good. Excited to have you on again, mate. It's been, I don't know, maybe it's been maybe 2 years or something.
At least. I reckon it's been 3.
How about that?
Because it was probably 3 months into when I started here.
Yeah, right on.
And it's been almost 4 years that I did my first jungle gymnastics Friday afternoon shadow.
Wow.
And then warm up. And then full class.
4 years since then.
Almost.
Holy shit, man.
So it was in the
July.
old gym, huh?
It was. And we've been here for 2 years at least now.
Well, yeah, we're coming up to our third Christmas party here.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, November's when we moved in. So we're like November this year will be 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, Alan's been with us for a long time. If you haven't listened to all of our podcasts, we did one with him a while back in the early
First of
days.
all, why not?
Yeah, that's right. You need to go back on that shit. But yeah, we dove into the movement thing and it was a nice intro to Alan. We're going to cover a bit of that today, get a bit of a background on him, but then also talk about what his evolution has been since that time. Which is kind of interesting, and I'm actually very keen to sort of dig into that myself. And I think for people listening, there's just a bit of context around what this movement thing is. A little example: I was at the park the other day with Hattie, a little girl, and there was another woman with her little boy. And the woman started talking with us, and she was a CrossFitter. And turns out she owns a CrossFit gym. And then she were talking about stuff, and then she said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "I own a gym too." And she said, "What's it called?" And I said, "It's called Jungle Brothers Strength and Movement." And she's like, "Movement? I like that." She's like, "Is that like strength conditioning?" And I said, "A little bit. Yeah, we do a bit of that and other stuff." And she's like, "Movement? What's movement?" And I was like, "Oh shit."
Big question.
I said, you know, you guys do like gymnastics? And she said, yeah. I was like, it's kind of like that. And I did, you know, it was
More free form version of gymnastics.
and specifically much more freeform version of CrossFit gymnastics. Because they don't, they for them, gymnastics is essentially any body weight exercise.
Right.
It's like, you know, like we're working push-ups today. I'm working on my gymnastics.
Right. Yeah.
But even still, it's just a hard thing to broach. It's like, what the fuck is it?
Yes. Yes.
So it would be cool to sort of dig into a little bit of that today and give a bit of context for the folks. Before that, let me just mention, gym's been open for a couple of weeks. Things are going really well. Everyone's adhering to the parameters regarding COVID-19, which is excellent. No outbreaks. We're clean. We are running all of our classes online as well. So if you want to train with us, whether in the gym or you want to follow our classes from your own gym or from your own home, get in touch, junglebrothers.com. You can also get us on Instagram at Jungle Brothers Movement. In terms of upcoming events, nothing. Oh, in the pipeline, we have our. Could you give us the mental health workshop we're looking at reigniting, Paulie?
Yeah, mental health first aid certificate run by the folks at Rise Foundation. We had to put it on hold because COVID came along and we couldn't gather together. I need to reconnect with them and we'll look to run that course next month. Yeah, so we have space for 20 people. I think we had bookings for 10. I'll fire that back up next week. But if you're interested in something like that, it's giving you more of an idea of what the aspects of mental health issues are and how you can deal with them from a first response kind of point of view. If you've got any interest in that, just let us know and I'll have the details ready in a few days.
Amazing. Only other thing on that is our internship kicks back off next week. That one's currently full, but
awesome.
Moving on from that, once that one is completed, we'll run our next one. Could be at the end of this year, could be next year, who knows? But if you are a budding coach or even an old coach and you want to learn some new tricks, get in touch. Brother Al, my homie.
Yes.
Tell us who you are. Give us a little background.
So my background is in, as Joe mentioned earlier, my professional background, I suppose, or serious physical fitness or training background would be in the martial arts, and then kind of went into the movement thing, which Joe mentioned before. The movement thing was started for me with Ido Portal, who those who are in the know consider him to be the founding father of bringing that term and bringing a lot of knowledge and bringing a culture around movement. And then, but it wasn't to say that there was no culture or there was no knowledge or people practicing movement before that. It's just that when he brought it into the forefront, it kind of got people's attention, and a lot more people either were more attentive of movement practitioners or teachers that were already existing, or gave those practitioners and teachers a platform from which to broadcast their own version, if you will, of movement. So if I was to describe my start in this quote-unquote movement thing with Ido Portal to, someone who's never done it, maybe someone who doesn't train very much or train at all, got to think of it like it's a combination of acrobatics with gymnastics, with strength, with coordination, with rhythm, with perception, spatial awareness. It's essentially trying to break people's minds out of the mold of exercise, or fitness is exercise, and exercise is movements A, B, and C, like bicep curl, squat, deadlift, etc. Like, it's kind of breaking people's psychology around looking at physical health as simply a series of exercises to be done certain amount of repetitions, and somehow magically your body will become healthy.
Functional.
Yeah, functional, healthy, optimal. I mean, there's so many terms and everyone has a different meaning behind it. And that's actually one of the challenges that I think a normal person faces, but, coaches and professionals, what words do you use, right? But for the average person, how they can benefit from using that mindset of movement is that their body is far more complex than, a pec deck or a bench press or what you would term a typical exercise. It's far more complex than those exercises can account for. So it's very important to move beyond those exercises, not purely from add more exercises. It's, you can move. There's so many variations within even just one movement. Like if you do a squat, if you shift your body slightly to the left, it becomes a slightly different squat because your center of mass is driving impact into different areas. So that squat that you think is a squat is not actually a squat if you just 1 millimeter forward or 1 millimeter rotation to the left. It changes. Everything changes. So for me, it's become a case of movement is a practice of becoming more aware of what you are, like aware of your composition, that you have bones, that you have coating around the bones that we call joints. And then there's fluid between the joints. There's also space between the joints. And then that's just the skeleton. And then there's the soft tissue, muscle, tendon, ligament, fascia. And then there's your organs. And they're all in one freaking system. Yeah. And you can't really separate one from the other. You can't be like, okay, I'm only going to work my core today, but I don't want to disrupt my organs. It's like, no, you're going to this force everywhere all the time. It's just whether or not you're aware of it or not. And again, that's the practice.
There's two interesting terms in what you said that we probably take for granted a bit, but that when I first heard them, I was like, oh, that's new. One is practitioner, and the other is teacher.
I remember Sylvia in class, I would say practitioner, and she pulled me aside later. She's like, oh my God, I've never heard that word before. Use the word practitioner. So most people don't think of it in those terms, and I think the terms, it helps because it opens up a new scope of, all right, okay, I can view this thing called exercise from a different angle. It's not just it's the whole elephant thing. If you're so close to an elephant near its leg, you think it's just a trunk or something, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And if you're close to its ear, you think it's something else, But really, if you zoom back out far enough, it's an elephant. And then if you turn around, you see the other side of it. You go above it, you see the top of it, and it looks completely different. So yeah, that's what these terms lend itself to, a different perspective.
And so, yeah, and I guess the idea of practitioner, like that's kind of empowering in a way because it's saying that you're not just it's going away from that you are exercising or even training. I mean, we use training and I think that has a different connotation to exercising or, even working out. But they're kind of very, simplistic. Exercising is a very simplistic term and it almost implies that you're doing something that you need to do because you're out of shape Or
Yeah.
like there's this prerequisite to be healthy,
Oh man,
which is you got to
100%.
go and do 30 minutes today of exercise. Whereas when you're a practitioner, you kind of you're kind of guiding your own journey in a way, aren't you?
Yeah. And you're always doing it. You know, like outside the gym, as soon as you step outside the gym, you realize that you're still moving, you're still loading your joints. You still can be aware of how your body is moving when you're walking out of the gym, when you're walking upstairs, when you're picking something up, you know, when you're closing the door of a car. Everything is still, you can make that movement better or you can make it worse. And if you don't consider your movements, what tends to happen is that you build up lots of different kinds of RSIs in your body, repetitive stress injuries. And that's the kind of thing that I've been seeing, and it's kind of how I've modeled my business, Train Away Your Pain, is to address some of these things, because a lot of people don't realize they're building up a lot of RSIs in their body, whether it be in their shoulder joint, in their back, in their knees, in their hips. And it's not, it's to do with the lack of movement in general, like the lack of exercise. That's always going to do it. But there's also people who exercise plenty and they still have that. So it's not the exercise, it's how it's done. It's how you're loading yourself, you know?
You mean the difference between like when you do like flat bench press, but then after 6 weeks you go to incline?
Yeah, that's one really good way of describing it, because you're loading the pec and you're loading the shoulder joints and everything differently.
I'm actually hanging a bit of shit on that idea, but
Right.
no, I'm making a joke based on changing the variation of the bench press you do is not really what we're talking about.
No, and it's not enough. Yeah.
We're discussing like actually choosing like different realms of movement, right?
Right. And like I said, like you do the same, just to use that example, like a flat bench, you could actually just change the way that you're thinking about it, how far you go with it, you know, and the timing of the movements. Like where do you fire from? When do you fire from? You know, when do you lock out? Where do you push from? Do you push from your scaps or do you push from, everything changes everything.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of what you start to realize when you actually start studying the movements as you're exercising. I think that's the biggest thing. If you can study the movement while you're exercising, even like as a like, you know, quote unquote regular person, but even as a high level practitioner, that's what we're constantly doing. You know, otherwise how do we learn? We just kind of go like, oh, I've mastered that, and then we move on. But you know, you may not have, and there might still be a lot there.
So your journey, as you mentioned, kind of very much started with Ido Portal, as you said, is kind of considered by many in the know to be the godfather of the movement, or you know, this push towards us, you know, to what you could call a style of training now.
It is a style, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we've all had, most of the coaches here, myself included, have had some experience with him along the way, and so there's very much a lot of his influence in what we do.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know him, just go and Google him because you'll enjoy the little journey you go on.
Yep.
From there to where you are now seems to be, there's been some evolution that's taken place.
Yeah.
What is that evolution? What's happened?
Well, about 3 years ago, I started. So what happened? Like I said, when Ido came out and made movement more famous, other practitioners started to come into my awareness. So either through social media or word of mouth, and a group called Fighting Monkey came into my awareness through my feed somehow. And some of the movements that I saw really attracted me. So I started exploring that aspect of it instead. And if I can compare the two, so the style of training that Ido promotes is hard style. It's volume. Volume is like capacity, and volume is king. And it's highly coveted and sought after by the followers of Ido. And I did that for a while. Like, to give you an idea, imagine training 6 times a week, twice a day, AM, PM, 90 minutes to 2 hours, sometimes more, depending on the program. That was kind of my life when I was working in my previous job before I started working here. And it was cool and it made me feel special, but it's not sustainable. And it's a lot of time input as well. Like as soon as I started working here and I was working AMs and PMs, I suddenly found that I couldn't do that anymore because the 2 training sessions would be too close together. And not only that, the time that I could spend training, I could also be spending developing my business and spending time with my now wife. You know, time spent with friends, time resting and recovering. So it's like it's a big chunk of your waking hours spent doing this, and then you got to ask yourself at some point, like, why am I doing this? Like, what's it actually for? And for me, as soon as I left my old job, the role that it played was no longer. It was no longer required, because the job was such a weight on me at the time that I needed an escape, and I needed a mission, and that was my mission. And my mission actually was to get out and start working in the field, and I did it. So I didn't need it anymore.
You mean you didn't need the hard style training?
I didn't need the hard style training, and it wasn't giving me anything more. Like, it wasn't rewarding anymore, you know, to the same degree, because it's not like I was getting any glory from it. It wasn't like I was getting paid. It wasn't like I was getting any recognition for it. It was just like punishing myself to do the training. And at some point you got to ask yourself, why am I punishing myself? So after that, I was just like, you know what? It doesn't work on so many fronts that I got to start doing something else. And luckily, like I said, Fighting Monkey was already in my periphery as I was coming to the tail end of my journey with Ido. And once I attended the first workshop in Brisbane, it was like what I felt in the beginning with Ido, like just mind blown, like a new perspective. And I felt a tremendous sense of relief that I didn't have to push myself so hard, that I could move in a different way and still get 80%, if not more, of the benefit without draining my time and without draining my energy, and actually get a lot more connection to myself. Because I think that's what most people went into movement for. It wasn't just the initial thing was that self-dominance. It's like the awesome acro and the planches and the front levers and stuff. But then ultimately it starts becoming about like exploring yourself, you know, like, you know, how far can I push myself, or what can I do? Or, you know, if you go to like any of Ido's events now, they're much less hard style than they were before, from what I've heard. They're more to do with, like, you know, I mean, this is only my outside interpretation, but a bit more spatial awareness, rhythm, ocular stuff like eyes, you know, like really stuff that most normal
more
people.
More fringy stuff.
Super fringy, yeah. But when you're in it, you're like, okay, I get it. This is kind of cool, right? So I'm like, if I'm going to do that, like, you know, there's a million ways to explore that. There's a million ways to, in Ido's words, skin that cat.
And and you've always been creative enough to go ahead and search for that on your own. With all your past experiences as well, I suppose.
Yeah. You know, I've always been someone that's explored on my own. I mean, that's how I got my start in movement. When I was like 4 years old, I remember. I think I mentioned this in the first podcast, but it bears mentioning again. It's just the attraction to martial arts, and then not being allowed to learn martial arts. Like, I had to study. And then that obstacle became a motivating force. And then I was like, fuck this. And then I went to the backyard, and only with my memories, like just my memories, like so vivid, every movement so vividly like etched into my brain. And I just practiced it until like, and it was all feel. It was all like, okay, use my body, my proprioception, my body awareness, and then use the shadows a little bit, and then use the feeling. It's like, does this feel the way that it made me feel when I saw it? Does it feel the way it looks? That question itself is already like, it already teaches you a lot.
You were 4?
I was 4, yeah.
And you were practicing martial arts in the backyard like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah. I mean, look, most people kind of imitated and stuff, but I kind of went pretty serious. I was like, I need to make this exactly the same.
Yeah.
And and that was how I developed myself as a martial artist. So when I wasn't allowed to train throughout my whole upbringing. It was only when I was 18 and I had my own job. Well, I was working, and I had my own money, and I was at uni. So like, it was the capoeira class was like right next to where my uni was. So that's when I started to actually learn it formally. But because of my background, you know, like, I was able to pick up moves so quickly because I could just break it apart pretty quickly, you know. Did
you not do some breakdancing dance, like performance stuff at school as well?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I did. So high school, that was when the internet was in its infancy, and dance videos were popping up in my feed, like the really crazy robot dances that I think I don't think I'd never seen before, and I don't think most people had ever seen before unless you're in the scene, and it blew my mind. And that was so Bruce Lee was my first idol, and then David Elsewhere was my second idol. David Elsewhere was a guy, if you look him up, David Elsewhere 2001, there's a talent show where he's wearing this orange long sleeve t-shirt, a long sleeve shirt, and he's doing the robot dance, and it was like, I just copied him. So I did the same thing I did with martial arts with dance, and I did a performance at school with that. So I was very familiar with the martial arts and dance even before I started capoeira, which is why I think I chose capoeira, because it's a combination of the two. And I think it's why I was so good at it, because I knew how my body should move in the context of both. Whereas if you're a martial artist stepping into something like capoeira, and for those of you who don't know, capoeira is a Brazilian form of martial arts, bit of dance, bit of fighting, and
that's
and
what people
music.
think of when I tell them I do jiu-jitsu.
All right.
That's the dancing one.
That's the breakdancing one. Yeah. So if you're a pure martial artist, if you've done like Krav Maga or like karate or something, you go into capoeira, you're more than likely gonna be very stiff, because you're kind of stuck to that rigid, like, okay, I've got to be protective and combative, and then you're very stiff. And if you're a dancer, like a ballet dancer or a contemporary dancer, you tend to be very soft and willowy, and then you lose that combative edge that makes capoeira. But for me, because I'd done both, I knew I had a sensitivity for it. So I had eyes for it, if that makes sense. And so when you develop body awareness, you develop another set of eyes where you can see it because you felt it. And until you felt it, you can't see it. That's one of those things with any kind of movement discipline, any kind of movement, is that you have to experience it for yourself in order to be able to see it. Because until you do, a squat just looks like a squat, an X just looks like an X, a Y just looks like a Y. You can't really see the connections. Yeah.
I wanted to ask and go a little bit back to the Ido thing, and you guys you mentioned like the hard style training, and I didn't do any phases of his training, although I have gone on to do movement style training here in the gym and stuff. But is it all hard style training? Like for people who are listening to this podcast and it's the first time for them to hear about it, it's not all hard style training. You mentioned, but they do some other creative stuff, and there's dance aspects and stuff. And that, I guess, is all within the scope of movement. So it kind of takes on anything that is whatever anything that involves moving the body and controlling it. But is it that when you prescribe to doing training underneath the founder, or you said the founder, Ido, that the first phase of training is really hard style? Like, is it the same then as it is today, or is that kind of how they blood people or something like that? Because
yeah, I kind of see it like that in a way, probably. I don't know what it is like now, but it's kind of like if you want to be in the circle, you got to get through the gauntlet. You know?
Like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
They don't do that forever.
No. I mean, like, you don't. I mean, look, it's hard to say because I've been on the outside for so long now, so I'm not really sure what it's like now. But
I reckon there's. I think that without sounding critical of him, I think that he has always been very good at finding ways to create something new. And I think that back when he was a younger man and he was bringing this like hardcore movement, body weight strength, gymnastic, but like super refined, structured training with high level mobility. I think that when he was putting that out there and he was doing that was new. And that was a lot of what we fell in love with.
Yeah.
And then now that's
and the locomotion stuff was like movement with like strength.
Yeah. And it built muscle, like it made you strong, you looked strong, and it became and it was like, that's why his people were seen as like beasts. And so that kind of attracted more people who aspired to that.
Yeah.
But I think his body he's probably not doing that style of training anymore because you can only do that as a young man.
Yeah.
And
it burns you out too.
And it's also now semi-mainstream.
Yeah.
So he's had to find he's had to recreate, and going into that more very alternative, very much down the rabbit hole kind of nuanced elements of movement.
Yeah.
Is now what's new.
Yeah. Like what stood out was the capoeira influence, because he was also a capoeira guy, right? And I know that capoeira, because it's so dynamic, it gives you a really, really, really good base. And so he actually used some of the, it's called a floreo in capoeira. Floreo meaning flower. It's the floreos are actually the acrobatic elements of capoeira. So he combined acrobatic elements of capoeira with animal crawling patterns that he put specific strength or gymnastic based cues or points on, accents, right? So it looked super strong, but it had a flowing element to it, and it also had that capoeira-esque circularity, and it flowed.
Like it doesn't end.
It doesn't end, yeah.
Yeah.
So you just end up getting really like hypnotized by it, and you just want to do it because it looks so good. It looks so impressive, and it looks like it's so much fun to do, which it is. So yeah.
It looks that way. Until
Oh, yeah.
you try it, like
But it
everyone at the
hurts.
gym can attest.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Then you try it, you're like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah. And if you've ever done any of Ito's workshops or internships and stuff, there's a term death by locomotion. And it's just doing laps and laps, like locomotion for distance or like locomotion variations and combinations for distance or time. And it's hard. It's hard stuff.
For listeners, locomotion is traveling from one point to another.
Correct.
In any type of gait
Pattern.
you can think of.
Yeah.
Low, high, lower body, upper
Yeah.
body.
So most of his stuff was when he said locomotion, he kind of he was talking a lot about. I mean, I guess most people would associate it with the quadrupedal stuff, the four like hands and feet on the ground stuff, because that's kind of what capoeira is all about. It's like feet and then onto the hands, back on the feet, and then some of it's both. And then if you're doing an animal crawl, like a lizard crawl, it's like hands and feet both on the ground. If you're doing like a bear crawl and stuff, it's the same kind of thing. But locomotion really is, our base locomotion is the walking gait. And that's kind of how I see locomotion now. And that's more of where my study of movement has gone is how do I walk better? How do I run better? How do I like coordinate my upper to my lower body more? And that's where the Fighting Monkey stuff really helped. It really taught me a lot. So Ito's got his locomotion thing, right? And he's got a bunch of other things, but he's kind of really known for that, or at least that's what I was really attracted to. And with Fighting Monkey, I was really attracted to the coordinations, because Fighting Monkey is also something that it's even more out there in many ways. It's like you have to experience it to understand it.
You'll have to try and explain it for listeners.
Yeah,
in a
I'll do my
nutshell.
best.
What is Fighting Monkey?
I'll do my best.
It's got a cool name, but what the hell is it?
Well, the name actually comes from the fighting monkey that's in everyone's heads. That's chatterboxing. You're always got these voices that are pulling you one way or another. And Joseph, the creator, he's a martial artist. So in the martial arts, one of the central concepts is stilling the mind in the chaos of battle, right? I mean, that's the whole point of practicing martial arts, so you can be militarily effective, so you don't freak out and forget everything you learned in your training, and you can actually
You're going to be
win
ice
the battle.
cold
Yeah.
when someone comes up to you in the club.
Yeah, exactly. So that Fighting Monkey, the concept is coming from that sort of martial concept, martial philosophy of stilling the mind, stilling the chattering of the mind. But then how do you do that, right? So every discipline like yoga, different martial arts disciplines have their own philosophy and approach, right? But it's all kind of same mountain, same peak, different paths on the mountain. So Ito's got his way, what other martial arts master or dance master's got their own way. The way that Fighting Monkey does it is they imagine a group that basically only does workshops. And the workshops are in Europe. They're like massive. They're like 50 to 100 people. They're huge. But there's a bunch of people, and then there's a whole day set out for it. Maybe even a whole week, depending on if it's an intensive. And essentially, what it is like every day split in 2 or 3, and every section of the day you'll kind of do something a little bit different that challenges your body and your mind. So with Fighting Monkey, they do something called coordinations, and they put a piece of music on, and it's to teach you how to learn how to move without instruction, without explicit instruction, without hearing words. It's like, how does a bear cub learn how to walk without language? Just watches its mum, and it feels its body, right? So what he does, he just literally just turns the music on, and then he starts moving. He starts moving in these complex freaking patterns that completely scramble your brain, and it makes you so frustrated. And that's when the fighting monkey in your mind, the volume just goes to a fucking 11, and you're just fighting. You're not only fighting the physicality of it and trying to dance and not feel like a bit of a fool, but you're also fighting
like
your
an
mind.
idiot.
You feel like an absolute freaking idiot, and it's so frustrating in the beginning. But the thing is, everyone goes through that, and that's a really important part of the process of A, learning, but B, learning movement. And that's kind of one of the underlying processes of how Joseph designs the experience. So he doesn't want to necessarily go, okay, left hand is here on this beat, and the left leg is over there, and then the right hand is here, and then the right leg. Man, that takes so many syllables and so much time. And the thing is, if your mind gets in the way, the flow gets disrupted, and it's like you need a bit of the speed and momentum to inform the technique. So it's like a high level entry barrier, but then once you get over that barrier, everything becomes easier. So that's one of the things that he does. Then other things he does is like he uses like something called the practice ball, which is essentially a ball and a string, and then he just kind of like throws it around in circles, and you've got to like dodge it, and there's different games. So he was actually really famous for using movement games or movement scenarios to teach you and your body and your brain, like teach you a specific concept, or maybe even teach you about yourself, like how you respond in the situation. How did you respond to the frustration of the coordination? How did you respond to the ball as it was flying towards your head? Did you look at it and did you move intelligently, or did you back away and did you freeze? And so those pressures actually give you an idea of like what you're composed of, either physically or internally. So it's a big internal practice with a huge external component, but they're all sort of designed to work together. So coordinations, practice ball, and then generally what he'll do is he has like partner contact exercise. I actually haven't done a whole lot of them. I really want to do that, like the contact improv type stuff. I've actually never done contact improv. As long as I've been doing this this movement thing, I've actually never done contact improv.
Jits is a form of it.
That's true.
Is it? Yeah. What is contact improv?
I haven't done it.
Well, yeah, you move. I think you move. There's
Yeah.
probably you're motivated by a parameter or rule of the particular engagement, and you're both trying to achieve that, and then you move in response to how the other person's moving.
Yeah.
That's that's an assumption, but that's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah. That's a good description, because that's what it looks like to me on the outside. It actually
Did
looks
you guys
a
know
lot like...
that there is no such thing as true improvisation? Do you know that?
Okay, explain.
Drop a bomb.
Yeah. All right. So when I was at Movement Camp, which is an Ido Portal event run every year, I've gone to a couple a few years ago. We were doing locomotion, really complex. I think we got to a point where there was, you learn like here's one movement, one step. Okay, now here's a second step. Okay, a third. Now piece them together, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now here's 4, 5, 6. All right, now piece together 1 to 6. We got to a point where there was like 30 steps, and it took a week, and it took hours, and I was fumbling through a lot of them.
Sounds fun.
But it was really cool. But and your brain's fried, but you could see people who are like nailing it, and you're nailing it. Like I don't know, maybe I was piecing together like 21 of them. Like it's pretty cool. Anyway, so there's all these rehearsed sort of patterns that we're working through.
Yeah.
And then the instruction was, all right, like we're going to go 5 minutes, improvise, like go wherever you want. And I always found that really hard. And I just found myself doing the same movements I'd just been taught, right? Like you end up going, oh, I'll do this one that I know well and this one and this one. And I asked the question, because, you look at people who are improvising and I'm like, fucking hell, like it looks like they are truly flowing without any thought of where they're going. They're just going somewhere all the time. And I asked the question to I think I asked it to Odelia, who was teaching that class, who was, Ido's like right-hand woman. And Ido was in the class with us. And he pointed out, he said, there's no such thing as true improvisation because every movement you make will be premeditated. So when you're doing improvised work, you're actually just faking it. like you're considering what you're going to
putting-
do a split second before you do it. There's
Right.
you're not actually able to do something that you have completely no awareness of.
So I think this is where the practice ball chaos comes in with Fighting Monkey, because they love exploring that stuff as well, because their background is martial arts, dance, and athletics, right? And when you go to like high level dancers, right, especially ones that are more of contemporary flavor, they tend to want to break boundaries. They want to break the rules of dance. Like for example, you look at ballet; it's very rules based, very little improv, I would say, compared to other dance styles. You know,
It has its culture, it has its movements, its postures.
Exactly. But new dance styles, like contemporary dance styles, tend to want to break the rules. What are the conventions? How do we break them? Or even more, how do we move and move with music or move or dance in such a way that doesn't even consider that there are rules, rather than I'm dancing to break that rule, because it's a different intention completely.
Totally.
So like that's where the practice ball comes in, because if you're on your own, you probably will consider your next move because you have complete control of the space. But let's say in jiu-jitsu, that's really quite improvisational in a sense, because you don't know what especially if you never rolled with your partner before. If it's a new person, like you're improvising, you're being very responsive. You kind of have your game, because there's a point that you want to reach. You want to submit the guy. But there's a bit more improvisation there, only because of the fact there's an external force that you can't control that you have to respond to. So the like, for example, the stick game with Ido, where you got to pass the stick and you got to stay within about 2 inches from the stick, and you don't know where the stick's going to move next because it's being held by your partner. The practice ball being held by your partner, you don't know where it's going to go. That kind of stuff is it's pretty next level for a regular person, because it just looks like you're playing around, which in a sense you are. But it's actually trying to explore improvisation from a different perspective. And that's actually one of the things that Joseph, I remember in one of the workshops, he was saying like, let's do some kind of improv-y kind of thing. And he stopped us at one point. And he was like, you're very stiff. You're not letting yourself do anything new. You're doing the same 3 things over and over and over again, And so the exercise was actually to either become aware of that or let it go completely, which is fucking hard. Like, it's super hard to not move in the way that you just typically want to move.
Yeah.
Because everyone has...
Especially if you don't have that many tools in that kind of practice.
Yeah, exactly. And
I remember this.
I mean, I would argue, can you? Or is it just that if you have a lot of vocabulary, so let's say you have a lot of tools.
You have the illusion of improv.
Then okay, you can do 50 different patterns.
Yeah.
Whereas the inexperienced person can do 2.
Yeah. That's the ongoing debate then, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
And that's again takes it back to what we talk about, the practice. Because it's a practice. Today I'll try that, and then tomorrow I'll try that, and then the next day I'll try that, and every day will be a bit different. And I might get closer to an answer, or I might even end up not like getting further from an answer. I was like, you might end up with more questions about whether it is you can truly improvise. But at the end of the day, it's like, look, I think the average person will be like, what's even the point of that? Like, how's that going to even benefit me? And I mean, how would you guys answer that question? How would this exploration of improv help a normal person?
It's a great question. I think that largely it has a psychological benefit, which allows them to really suck at something, and feel very uncomfortable and understand that that's all right. And there's a room full of people who feel the same way, and whatever, you're not going to be judged for it, and it's not going to be the end of the world, and that sort of thing. I would also see it, to put it in context for folks who are new to this thing, I will also see it as lower on the list of priorities over certain other physical or other outcomes of training. However, important nonetheless.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree with everything Joe said, and even the lower in importance or priority for the normal person coming into training. But I also doesn't mean that it comes after, more linear type of training. Build a certain strength, then you can play the games.
Yeah.
So I'll also use the games at the beginning, because it can also serve to break the mold of thinking and to let them be a bit more free with how they think about movement. So just as an example, the games, Games are really useful for people. They're coming in to train for the first time, and
Definitely.
they can get physical without and moving into ranges without even thinking about it. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, you're exercising.
Yeah. That's definitely
So,
one
yeah,
of the things. Hey?
Yeah, definitely useful.
It's the same reason people play soccer for exercise, right? Or any kind of sport. It's like an excuse to do something with the body and like a goal, parameters to work within where you're doing some form of movement, right? So I kind of see it almost like as like, you know, your linear training, your structured training. It's building a foundation, or it's maintaining a foundation. It's kind of like taking a car into the shop, and then you need to test and pressure test that car. You need to pressure test that vehicle in something. Some people have sports. Some people have fighting, like sparring. But for some people, they don't have a sport and they're not into the fighting thing. One of the ways that you can really kind of pressure test them is by doing things like a stick game or a practice ball game or some kind of improv game, because they're going to confront the psychological block more than likely, but then they're also going to they're going to pressure test how their body articulates in response to the game. So if we're playing, say, like something like, like knee taps or something, like you touch their knees, don't let your knees be touched. That's the basic parameter. And then it's like they have to be very dynamic in that. And that's where if they're encouraged to be aware of what's happening, they can actually learn a lot about what is going on in their body. And then they've warmed up and then they're working on maybe like a lunge or a squat or something. Then they can be like, oh, I'm a bit more aware that I was like a bit collapsed in that thing there, and I'm going to work on filling in that gap now in this linear training. That's kind of see how, like personally, for the regular person, I think that's where the synergy is. That's where you want to use those games, is your pressure testing, and then you're becoming more aware of the body so that your training becomes better. And then when your training gets better, then you can pressure test better. And it becomes this feedback loop.
I agree. I do think that what you just said requires a high level of self-awareness.
Yes.
Which a lot of people probably they could easily have it, but I think that potentially they don't care to have it in that way. In terms of like, look, man, I just come to the gym 3 times a week. I got an hour, and I like the games. They're fun, and it's a good workout. And I think so that would be different to that, right? Like they're not using it as a tool to analyze or self-assess. But I'm like, that's fine. Like if that's what it is for you.
Oh yeah, definitely fine. But the invitation is always there to take it to that level.
Yes,
and that's what these even the Edo workshops and experiences, but particularly the Fighting Monkey type of experiences. And I think if you go to any movement teacher or practitioner worth their salt, they're going to provide a scenario or some kind of space in which you're going to be able to explore that. And I would encourage everyone to try that. Like, you don't necessarily go to a dance class, or because you're going to be so confronted, like probably, but something more movementy. And there's a lot of options out there these days, a lot of options. And that's a really good place to go to start to develop that sense of awareness, because I can guarantee you, if you want to get healthy, fit, lose weight, all of that, stronger overall, that's one of the best things that I could recommend anyone. Because like I said, bring it back to my upbringing. It's like, that's what I did from when I was 4. That's why I can go into most environments and be like, cool, I'm pretty comfortable here. I can pick things up pretty quickly. And you guys saw me. I never touched a barbell before I came here, and I'm pretty decently strong without ever having trained it. And it's because I've got the mobility, I've got the nervous enrichment, engagement, and I've got the body awareness. I know how to solve this physical problem better.
Yeah.
So I think anyone could benefit from that.
How do you see that kind of linear stuff? Take squatting and deadlifting and very basic foundational strength training. Where does that fit for you now?
I love it. I use it all the time in my coaching. So the way I see it is that there's the people, when they see a barbell, for example, they think powerlifting or Olympic lifting. They see the sport, and what I would encourage people to look at is look at the apparatus as a tool for diagnosing and developing your mechanics. So the way I teach is a deadlift and a squat, very different, because I'm not teaching that person just to get strong enough to lift more. I want, like most people who end up doing this work with me, they don't want to go heavier, because I encourage them to see what they can do with the weight that they have on the bar now. So it's like a 20 kilo bar with like maybe 2 5s or 2 10s on each side. It's not heavy, or 2 20s, depends on how big or fit that person is. But it's nowhere near their max. It's nowhere near their 3RM or 5RM. It's nowhere near that. it's enough weight to give them a feedback, kind of a training tool, like a partner, and give them some resistance so that they can activate enough against it to go into their mechanics deeper. You know, because if it's too heavy, your body locks up, and you're under so much pressure and struggle that you don't have enough bandwidth in your brain to be aware of the little things. You know, and those little things are what make the difference. The devil's in the details. You know, so I kind of use these apparatuses or these tools as a way of going deeper in awareness, either mentally, but mostly just physical awareness of the body. So really going deep into the hamstrings for a deadlift, for example. You know, that's where I use it. And as part of my private coaching, that's my structure. Like we do a lot of, you know, pretty what would be considered traditional lifting techniques, like pulling off the ground or pushing off the ground, but with a completely different intention. And, a lot of people get so much benefit out of that.
Give me an example of, say for a deadlift example, how would you, in simple terms, how would you change the intention of that?
So first of all, I would tell the person I'm working with that deadlifting is what I would consider a lower body pulling action, whereas a squat is a lower body pushing action. And then I tell them the differences, and I tell them, okay, with a squat and a deadlift, the difference between each movement, I'll show them, and they'll see that's very clear. And then I'll ask them, like, what's different? And then everyone gives me a different answer. But essentially, what would be different is that when you're pushing, your knees travel forward, okay, and you're receiving the weight in a different way. So you're kind of like a spring. Your lower body is a spring, and you're storing your spine into those springs. Because when you think about the amplification of a squatting movement as a jump, when you're jumping, you want to store your torso into your legs, and then you want to fire your torso out of your legs, right? So that's what you're trying to develop with the squat, is the non-propulsion version of a jump, right? So then I say, okay, so if the squat is a push, and the push is associated with the knees forward, right? Then the deadlift is actually a pull, right? Well, the opposite action is a pull, so it means that your knees go backward, right? And that gives them a really simple way of actually getting into the movement without it being about muscles, or without it being about, all right, like whatever the regular cues that you might find at a powerlifting gym, right? It's just, let's keep it at the bare basics. There's a weight on the ground, you weigh a certain amount, gravity's always been the same, okay? And this is a physical problem that we're trying to solve. We're trying to get leverage on this bar. We're trying to uproot the bar. We're trying to separate the weight from the ground. Only one of it is a pushing motion, one of it's a pulling motion. So then what I do after that is, okay, notice where the load goes. So if you're pushing, and you're storing your spine in your legs with maybe a bar on your back or wherever you're holding the weight, there's a mass that you're trying to absorb into the legs, and then your legs need to fold in some areas. Your knees are folding, your ankles are folding, you know? Your hips are folding. So feel the joints moving there. Map them out. Become familiar with where the entryways are. You know, every time you do it, if you time it slightly differently, you'll feel the load in a different place. I guarantee you, if you pay enough attention. So then, when they become more aware of that, that's when we can start to work with a bit more repetition and start to do those. You're going to do the reps anyway, but you're going to start to become more aware of the composition and the timing and the articulation, the coordination of everything. And yeah, we'll do the same thing with the other movements, essentially.
That's cool. So it's kind of how you present the context of it, in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the execution, would it look, if you had a powerlifter and they were seeing you and one of your clients doing a deadlift, are they going to be like, what the fuck is that? Or are they going to go, that's a deadlift, more or less?
It'll be pretty much indistinguishable.
I saw one this morning. You had a couple of guys doing a deadlift.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looked like a deadlift.
It looks like a deadlift.
Yeah.
Probably a very refined one if they're doing it enough, a lot.
Yeah.
Like these guys were new guys. But, once, for example, Carla, she's been with me for a little while. Her deadlift has improved so much. She's got much more, you just kind of see it in her spine. You can see it in her scaps. The whole body is alive. It's not just setting the body up and then lifting it off the floor. There's this sense of hands connected with feet. The head is doing something. The whole body is working. The whole body is engaged.
Because the goal is to lift it the most efficient way possible still.
It is.
Therefore, all of the alignments end up being the same as how a powerlifter would teach it.
It's
Physics,
leverage. Yeah,
there's principles that you have to adhere to be optimal. So
yeah, exactly.
That's cool. I like how you think about that.
Yeah, I dig that. Tell me, for someone who's listening, who's like, okay, yeah, movement thing sounds cool, but I just want to get jacked. I just want to, like that. And if we boil down a lot of what people want from
Asking for a friend
is to, so let's say I'm at 94 kilos. I want to get to 98. So no, not jacked, but people want to lose body fat. They want to, they want to look better. There's always that aesthetic side to training, as well as the other things, performance, getting out of pain, the other things that are of equal importance. How do you see the movement thing, and how do you see your approach sitting on that spectrum? And does it pay any kind of attention to that side of it?
So, okay. Are you talking about just aesthetics in general, or are you talking about putting on muscle specifically?
Let's say aesthetics.
Aesthetics.
And in general, I think you're saying does movement training even care about the general public's fitness goals? Or does it?
No, I want to know more about, not really fit, but more the body composition side and the look. Is there any consideration of that within what you do?
The consideration would be that body composition and an aesthetic look for the human body will emerge as a byproduct. For me, I mean, look, first of all, aesthetics has a lot to do also with genetics. You actually have to work with what you got at the end of the day. Not everyone's going to look like Arnie or Instagram model or whatever. If you have the genetic, and you're going to look like that. And if you don't, and you try for it, good luck. But there's always going to be a limiting factor. That's not to say that you can't develop an athletic physique. That's not to say that you can't develop a physique that if you had your shirt off, that someone wouldn't be like, this guy trains, this guy works out, this guy takes care of himself. So in that sense, the movement thing, the way I see movement is more of a study of biomechanics, right? And the biomechanics of fighting and fight and flight, right? So combative mechanics, but also locomotive mechanics. That's where our bodies were born from that. If we didn't have the ability to run or to fight, we wouldn't be able to survive. Survival was number one. And our bodies haven't forgotten that, thankfully, right? So we've got to address that, right? So my assertion is that if you have great mechanics, you can put on whatever muscle you want more easily because your system isn't blocked. So, and what I mean by that is, what I notice a lot is that a lot of people cannot either throw a punch or throw a ball. And that's a big problem. That's a huge problem. And I'll tell you why. If you can't throw a ball, it means that your shoulder cannot handle acceleration. It can't handle the whip, and it can't handle speed, right? Because a throw is actually a rapid projection of an object, either your fist or something that you're holding in your fist, and transmitting the force into that projectile into a target, right? So either throwing a spear or rock into a target, or you're throwing your fist into someone's body, whatever. If you can't do that, if you can't throw a ball and project it, it means that it says a lot about the health of the tissue around the shoulder. So you probably don't have stretchiness. That's a problem. Everything's gonna be compressed there. If everything is compressed, your joints are rubbing together like that, you probably have shoulder pain. You probably have neck pain. You probably have something not right going on, and then you have the domino effect of that. What happens when your shoulder's in pain and not working properly? Oh, the back has to take something, or the hips have to take something, or something is out. Then when that's out, another thing's out. It's a domino effect. So if you have a good ability to whip the arms and whip the legs and whip the spine, that's your whole body, right? If you can whip all of that, it means that you have a great open channel through which force can travel. And that's actually, for me, the fundamental study of movement is the study of force moving through the body, right? If you look at the Tai Chi practitioners, they're doing their forms and stuff. When they say Chi, I think kinetics. And the thing is, that's actually, I mean, from the outside looking in and from my study, that's one of my interpretations. But I know that, traditional Chinese medicine, there's so many different arms and so complex that there's more things. But from a physical perspective, from a kinetic perspective, it is all about the circulation of kinetics, right? So, and throwing a ball or throwing your fists is a study of generating kinetic energy and transmitting that force through a channel, through your spine, through your arm, and out of your hand into an object. And then evolutionarily, you can turn a rock into dinner, which other animals can't do. And that's one of the things that gave us our competitive edge. We turned rocks into dinner, then we turned rocks into spears, and then spears into arrows, and arrows into firearms, and firearms into missiles. It's like this is a really profound fucking evolution here. And if you can't throw, it means you're missing out on all that, you know? And the reason I was able to do so much is because when I was younger, I was always playing ball sports. I was always playing cricket. I was playing like on the field, just throwing with my friends, just throwing a ball around, you know? And in that, you learn so much about your body. And if you don't have that, you're leaving a lot on the table. It's kind of like the jiu-jitsu thing with leg locks. You're leaving 50% of your body behind, or whatever that quote is from Dean Lister. You're not considering 50% of the body. That's a big part of it. And I think I would encourage anyone that's wanting to put on mass, so take it back to the mass question, or like aesthetics.
Yeah, how many times do I have to throw to get big?
Quite a bit. It sort of depend on where you are. But you know, if you throw more, you'll clear your shoulders out. You know, I do a lot of like arm swinging type stuff and throwing. Like you've seen the speed tools that I use. The coordinations are a big part of that is arm swings.
There's a lot of throwing in there, isn't there?
Super amount of throwing. And it's like, if you don't play a ball sport, doing coordinations, the fighting monkey style coordination is one of the best ways to get a shitload of reps of throwing in. Seriously. You play one rap song and you do like 100 at least reps of a throwing pattern, depending on the coordination that you do. And like it's going to develop all these other things, but it's mostly, for me, it's developing that connection to how to generate force, how to generate kinetic energy, and then how to channel that energy through your body and allow your body to channel it, if that makes sense. And then when you've got that open channel, my speculation is that you're probably going to find it easier to load muscle on that structure and keep it. You know, you might not be a bodybuilder, but you probably have a better chance of, you know, but then also of course, genetics plays into it and all that, blah, blah, blah. But
so you're very much saying it's a mechanics piece first, and then the building of muscle or the changing of body composition comes easily at that point.
Comes a bit easier,
yeah.
Depending on other genetic factors, et cetera, et cetera. But I found personally, for me, having done a lot of the speed tool striking type stuff, the strength work, I just found that I could just feel the muscle like growing a bit more, if that makes sense. And then like the striations of the muscles like taking on, like they're leading the right shape, if that makes sense. When you look at your body in the mirror, you just kind of see the shape. You just look in shape, the in shape look. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of, but different to the in-shape look for the guy at Bondi Beach with the little legs and the big upper body.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking through that lens of like, you know, like true strength and actual capability and all of these different things that are kind of embodied in what you're talking about. You can see a difference.
Yeah, exactly. But again, with the aesthetics question, it's like, what aesthetic are you chasing? You know, that's a whole other question.
Well, that's right. It's a bit subjective, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And then why as well. But yeah, go on.
I guess I asked that because, you know, say with our approach at the gym here, it's you know, strength and movement, right? So movement's obviously a big thing for us. However, we've never wanted to be just that. And there's a side of the movement thing that you know, I feel is like what we were talking about, where it goes really deep down the rabbit hole, which for me, I'm not that interested in it. So I might go to an event or a workshop or something and I'll go down the rabbit hole for that period of time. But then afterwards in my own training, I'm like, I like to just do some strength stuff and you know, like I like the Ido Portal stuff of 10 years ago, right? And we've had this conversation before, and you kind of find your groove, right? But so, you know, and for a lot of people that train with us, and I'm guessing people that are listening too, you know, they hear this stuff and they're like, well, that sounds really cool, but you know, man, I got the kids a few days a week and they got to go to sport and I train 2 or 3 times, so. So where's it at? Like, you know, I want to look good and I want to feel good too. And so I guess it's trying to just give a bit of context around like, all right, well, how do you, as someone who kind of, you don't have either the care to or the desire to rather, or the time to jump into this thing wholeheartedly. However, how is it still relevant for you in a way?
So how's the movement thing relevant to that person, you mean?
Well,
Or-
yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at with that question.
Oh, look, if that person's not interested, power to them, you know? Like that's their life, you know? I wouldn't force it down their throat. Like I think there's so many benefits of everything, but if the person doesn't want it or value it or see the value in it in that moment in time, that's fine, you know? Like it's not something that like I personally feel I have to be evangelical about anymore. I was at a time, believe me. But
I think we all have been.
yeah,
at the time.
yeah, because it's the passion, it's the energy, it's the you know.
And when you're doing it, I remember when you're talking about, like when I was doing Ito's online training, I was like, how could anyone ever want to do anything else? Like,
Yeah, totally.
What do you
totally.
mean you don't want to dedicate 4 hours of
Yeah.
your day to training? Like,
Yeah.
what could be more important?
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get a bit angry. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, people
You know?
don't get it.
Oh,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that. I remember that.
Oh, dude.
Remember that?
Yeah. I remember having that attitude to a couple of friends, and they pulled Mel aside, and they're like, "Hey, is Alan all right?
It's in a cult.
He's a bit angry because you're
That's
just so
crazy.
evangelical about seriously, and you don't even realize. So
But when you come back to the original kind of trying to define what movement was, we started before and we were saying, okay, what's the Ito movement thing? And before we said it was a hard style of movement, you described it really well. And I always find it very difficult to define it in a couple of lines. And it was, what did you say? It's built a study of body awareness.
yeah, body awareness
So-
or kinetic energy.
Yeah. So the body awareness thing, I think, is true of someone who goes deep down the rabbit hole, or the example that you're saying of the person who is just wants to train and they've only got a couple of days a week and they don't really want to engage on a high level. I think that's the part of the movement that we build here, which is no matter whether you're in here for the 2 or 3 sessions that you can get in your busy life or not, you walk out of here and you're trying to build an awareness in the other 23 hours of the day and every day of the week type thing. And I know, for a lot of people, exercise is you just go there and then you go and you switch off and you just fucking do whatever you do for the rest of the day. So I feel like, and I listened to, the conversation and, I know that happened for me at some point where it was like, I just, I'm going to the gym or I do sport. I play soccer 3 times a week. And then it was like, okay, I'm at work and how am I moving? I change my footwear. How am I standing? Is my jumper on a cold morning or is it off? And then I, went through a phase where I'd always have a t-shirt on at 5 a.m. in the morning to wake up. And, it's just like becoming more aware of the physical aspects of my body, which I just didn't think about at all. So I think in terms of that, which was like the original kind of, if you were trying to distill what movement is, because at the moment, we're trying to explain, what is Fighting Monkey? And there's all the conceptual stuff.
Yeah.
And then at some point you said, because Fighting Monkey is essentially martial arts, dancing, and something. And,
Martial arts, dance, and athletics.
Yeah, so you got the description of what it is from the outside, and then you've got what is the essence or the concept of it. So I think the concept of movement is relevant for every single person in that awareness thing, maybe.
Yeah.
But how you practice it and, whether someone's doing it this way or that way, whether they've gone off on a tangent or not is less relevant to everyone. But
And I think this might be a conversation for another podcast, but I think that what I'm more interested in is what are people more preoccupied by in their lives that makes them not interested in this stuff that we know to be very important.
Stock market,
Yeah. That's it.
bushfires.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
Keep
get
going.
I mean, there's
Trump.
Well, there isn't just that like sort of political terror that the media is, whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But I think from a general like personal perspective, I think because my previous job was in finance, and I didn't have a financial background. I was pretty shit with my own personal finances. But that job taught me a lot because I also wanted to get out of there. So I was like, I've got to get my shit together. And then once I finally got all the tools together to do that, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders, and suddenly I had so much more room in my brain and my energy to focus on other things. And because I got through that, I can see that, especially because I'm teaching people about this, and I can tell when I talk to some people that they think that they want exercise, but I can see they're preoccupied with other things. And generally one of the biggest preoccupations that everyone shares is the preoccupation about money, security, It's a preoccupation, and it's not a bad thing to think about. And I think we need those tools, because if we can't navigate that, this is something I always tell people, like, if you don't exercise and eat like shit, you could survive for decades. You could live until you're over 60. You could,
If you don't exercise and you do eat like shit.
yeah. If you do all the wrong things that we think are
you'll probably
wrong,
still make it.
You'll still make it
to the close to the finish line that I'm going to get to.
100%. But if you stop paying your rent or your mortgage for a month or two, 3 maybe, you're out on the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a far more immediate concern for people. And so part of what I'm trying to do now is actually develop a coaching program that actually tries to address that. And that's something I've sort of done on the side in the past, but I'm recognizing it as something more important for people in order to make space in their energy, in their time, in their mental capacity to even take on these concepts that we mentioned. I mean, these are some serious concepts. You know what I mean? Some serious stuff. You need to empty your cup a little bit. But if your cup is full, and I'm not even talking about cup is full with another discipline of martial arts or movement or whatever. It's just literally, do you even have time in your week for it? You know, do you have time in your time for it? And if you don't, where is all that time going? And I will take a guess, 9 out of 10 people, it is to do with personal finances. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, me too.
Definitely a topic for another podcast.
Yeah.
I want to wrap it up there. But, mate, so you've got your own thing going on right now with your training. You're coaching at Jungle Brothers here.
Yep.
Do you want to give us a little plug? Where can people get at you? What's the process there?
So my coaching business is called Train Away Your Pain. So trainawaypain.com. And all the information is on there. I run a group coaching program up to 4 people. You do a foundation program first to teach you how to train. And then there's a time and a place for you to come and practice how to move in that private group coaching program. So if you're unfit, if you feel unhealthy, or if you feel stiff, achy, and whatnot, it's a movement coaching program to help you to overcome pain. Okay, but even if you don't have pain, I think that if you resonated with anything that I said and you want to learn how to move better, explore yourself, the program is open for you as well. And you can follow me on @TrainAwayYourPain on Instagram, but also my personal page I'll be bringing back online very shortly. So @_Alan Long, ALLANLONG. So you can catch all my personal stuff on that side. Because Train Away Your Pain is now no longer a personal page.
I like it. On that business front.
Yeah. Got to keep it clean. You know, keep it clear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Bro, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Brother Paulie, Preach.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Al, for coming in. I love how you think and how you speak. So it's cool. I don't get to catch up with you enough.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is evolving while, concurrently in front of us, next to us. And it's like...
It's all new.
This is actually one of the only chances we get to dive into it.
Yeah, cool. Oh, I'm glad that we had this chance then.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully more in the future.
And well done.
Thank you.
It's nice, dude. It's
Appreciate
cool
it.
evolution.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening today, guys. We're drinking coffee from Panavore today, which I didn't give a plug at the beginning, but we're always drinking Panavore coffee because Tree's my boy. If you're in Pagewood, you should go by their cafe and you should ask for the Joey sandwich. Just a note, neither of you two guys have had a Joey sandwich. You should also go
I've
try
had one.
You've had one?
Yeah, it's good.
It's delicious, huh? That was episode 65. If you liked it, please take a screenshot, post about it on your stories, tag a friend, share it with someone, help support the show. And if you want to get in touch with us, junglebrothers.com or @Jungle Brothers Movement on Instagram. Thanks very much, you guys. Cheers, fellas. See you next week.
Gotchas.
See ya. Huge generic music.